certified genetic counselor. She received her bachelor's degree from Rutgers in New Brunswick in psychology, and then she got her master's in genetic counseling from Long Island University. She worked for several years at Recombine, which is in New York City, and that's a genetic counseling and genetic testing organization. And she has recently taken on a job with Myriad, doing, I guess, the same sorts of things. And today she's going to enlighten us as to what, a little bit about how genes work, and then how genetic counseling and testing works, and what tests are out there, and who gets them, and all that sort of thing. So I thank you very much. No heckling from her family who's attended today, and I'll turn the floor over. Thank you.
Thanks for coming, first of all. This is exciting. So what I thought I'd start off this lecture series is calling it Genetics 101. It's a little bit of a brainchild of a friend of mine who actually decided that, hey, there was a ton of people that were working at the previous company that I was working with at Recombine, and they really had no idea about genetics, but happened to be working for a genetic testing company. Some of, obviously, the more specialist, but like customer service, for example, is taking phone calls. So that's where the kind of thought process comes in here. So I thought we'd start off a little bit with talking about genetics. So what I have here is talking a little bit about what the difference is between inherited and somatic mutations, for example. I thought we'd also talk a little bit about recessive inheritance versus dominant inheritance. And then where does a genetic counselor fit in with all of that information, and what's really relevant for me to kind of talk to with my patients about, and what kind of specialties there are amongst genetic counselors themselves. Also, I'm open to questions. So you have questions coming along, just ask them. I'm happy to answer them. So, genetics, what's it good for? So first I thought I'd start out with a definition and talk about what that definition actually means to me. So first off, this is a definition I found: the study of heredity and the variation of inherited characteristics. And another piece says the genetic properties or features of an organism, characteristic, etc. So why did I look at this? So first, I think that it's important to understand that just because something is genetic does not mean it's inherited. Meaning that just because you are an individual that happens to have blue eyes doesn't mean that you inherited that necessarily from your mom. There's a piece of both coming from mom and dad. But then a lot of questions I get often are, what is a somatic mutation versus an inherited mutation? So somatic mutations occur in what we call non-germline issues. So what's an example of that? An example of that is sometimes someone develops a tumor. Let's say it's in their breast, their lungs, or something along those lines. That's what's happening there is genetic, right? There's a change in their gene that is causing that. But it doesn't mean that it necessarily was inherited from mom or dad. It means that the function of kind of preventing a tumor from growing isn't working properly within their body. Now, there also are inherited forms of cancer. I'll go over that a little bit more in detail, but when something is inherited, it means that it's in every cell of the body. It doesn't mean that just one cell didn't work the way that it was supposed to and kind of generated and kept growing. That's the difference there. The difference is that with germline, it's in every cell of the body. With somatic, it's one change that kind of continues to proliferate and grow. Does that make sense? You have questions about that? Go ahead.
What is germline?
So germline means that it's actually in all your gene, right? So let's just say in the cells of your body there are chromosomes. Inside those chromosomes are your genes, right? So that's what germline means. Does that make sense?
So somatic is the exact opposite.
Any other questions?
So for something like uterine cancer, let's say, if that travels through the germ lines, then even if you have the reproductive organs removed, you still have those genes in place?
So let's talk about that. So imagine, let's say that there's a gene mutation that can cause uterine cancer, right? So let's say that syndrome itself is called Lynch syndrome. And if you have a mutation in one of the cells of your, if you have a mutation in that specific gene, let's call it MSH6. That's going to dramatically increase your risk to develop uterine cancer. So that risk is around 71%. Let's just say if you had that mutation. But let's just say it wasn't that case. Just say there was, there's a lot of things that can happen to our bodies over the course of our lives, right? And imagine there was a certain drug that you had taken over the course of your life, and it kind of made one part of your body not function that properly, and then it, over time, it's just not working the way that it's supposed to, and the function that's kind of saying, hey, we got to repair this, isn't working properly there, right? Then it's going to continue to proliferate, continue to grow.
So if it's a
So it
somatic
could
mutation, the person could use hormone replacements, but if it's a germline mutation, they should.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Okay? So that's getting more into treatment stuff.
Okay.
So, to answer your question, just because someone has uterine cancer, it doesn't mean that it can't be inherited. It doesn't mean that it can't be environmental. It could be a combination of both. It could be just one. It could just be the other.
So how do we find out whether it's inherited or?
That's a good question. That's where a genetic counselor comes into play, to be honest. I'll touch on that a little bit more and when that makes sense. But if I don't touch on it, remind me.
Sure.
Okay? Okay. So, autosomal recessive inheritance. Who's heard of autosomal recessive inheritance before? Okay. So, basically, the first word, autosomal. Autosomal means that it has nothing to do with the sex chromosomes in our body. It means that when someone has an autosomal mutation or autosomal recessive inheritance or autosomal dominant inheritance, it means that it can happen in both sexes. It doesn't happen strictly with males. It doesn't happen strictly with females. It happens in both. Okay. So, an autosomal recessive disease, common example is cystic fibrosis. Has anyone heard of cystic fibrosis here? Right? Okay.
My mom's side of the family suffers from it.
So, family members of yours have been affected with cystic fibrosis, right? On your maternal side? Okay. So, for those that aren't so aware of cystic fibrosis, for example, cystic fibrosis is a chronic progressive disease that affects the respiratory system and the digestive system. What does that mean? And why does it affect that part? Essentially, it affects those parts of the body because there's this really thick, sticky mucus that's associated for those that are affected with cystic fibrosis. That means that mucus is getting stuck on their lungs, so it causes fibrosis, meaning scarring on their lungs. And as far as the digestive side, it's blocking the ducts in the pancreas. So the responsibility there is, to really, I'm trying to think a little bit how to explain it. But essentially, if you want to not be malnourished, the pancreas's responsibility is, producing insulin, digestive organs, things like that. Digestive enzymes, I'm sorry. So if that's not working properly, then you're going to have malnutrition issues like that.
Aren't you supposed to put that in?
Huh?
But my mom explained to me that it's inherited from your side of the family usually, but
Nope. It's autosomal recessive. So what does that mean? So I'll explain what that means. That means in order to be affected with an autosomal recessive condition like cystic fibrosis, dad has to be a carrier and mom has to be a carrier. So they both have to be carriers for the same condition in order for there to be a 25% chance to have an affected child with that condition. So that's what autosomal recessive means. You can have one copy not working, and that working copy of your gene is compensating for that non-working copy of your gene. Go ahead.
so would I be carrying the gene?
It depends, right? So is your mom's not affected with the condition.
She's not, but my cousins are.
Your cousins are. So is that your mom's sister?
Brothers.
Brothers. So then they would definitely be carriers, right? In order to have affected children, they would need to be carriers. So what does that mean? That's a good question. That means that your mom has about a 50% chance to be a carrier, just like her brothers, okay? So what does that mean for you?
My 25%.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a 25% chance that you would be a carrier for that condition. Exactly right. So what's the follow-up question there? How do I get tested, right? How do I figure that out? So there is carrier screening. That was actually one of the companies that I just recently left. Now I'm working for Myriad Genetics, which is cancer testing. But before I was working in the fertility realm, and that's really talking to patients every day, just like you, that have a family history and they want to know, hey, what's my risk? What's my chance of being a carrier for this?
So say I would marry a woman that has
she's a carrier?
Yeah,
So if she's a carrier and you're a carrier,
my child would have 75% chance of being a carrier.
no,
or-
right? Well, a 75, no, so it would be, in terms of your chance of being a carrier, not so worried about that. You're worried about the chance of actually having a child that's affected, right? So if you're both carriers, right, this is a good example here, right? You're using the example and saying, hey, if I have a partner that happens to be a carrier just like me, what's the chance that they'll be a carrier, right? So first off, the chance that they're going to be a carrier just like you is 50%, right? They're first degree relatives to you, and it's a 50-50 chance which copy they get passed down. There's a chance that they get no mutations, not one from you or one from your partner, right? That's a 25% chance. Now there's a 25% chance also that they would inherit both mutations, right? So that's where that falls in, right? So it's 1 out of 4, 1 out of 4, 1 and a half. Does that make sense? 1 half, not 1 and a half. So, who has questions about this? Does this all make sense? Yeah? Okay. So let's switch gears then. So, autosomal dominant inheritance. So, what makes autosomal dominant inheritance different is that you only have to have one non-working copy of your gene in order to be affected with the condition. So, that's a little bit different than autosomal recessive, where you have to have 2 non-working copies of your gene. Okay? An example, I don't know if anyone's heard of this. Has anyone heard of Huntington's disease? Heard of Huntington's? Okay. What do you know about Huntington's?
It's a very good, like, there's no cure for it.
So that's a good point. A lot of autosomal dominant conditions are pretty severe in nature. So, what's your name?
William.
William. Okay, so William just brought up a point and said, I know this is a very deadly condition. Huntington's disease is a condition where individuals are usually starting to show symptoms later in life. And they're showing symptoms later in life. What I mean by that is probably like middle age and getting older. They start losing motor function. They have losing control of motor function, for example. They can also have issues with depression and other mental illnesses. It's one of those conditions where ultimately they're having issues swallowing. They don't remember who they are. There's a lot of issues that are really surrounded by Huntington's disease. And this is a condition where, did you remember what I said about around what time it started?
Middle age.
Middle age, right? When do people usually have kids?
Middle age.
Or a little younger, right? So these are people that often find out that they have a disease, right, after they've already had kids. So that's something to keep in mind as well, because they're showing symptoms. But then there are some people that already know, right? They saw mom or dad go through something like this, and then there was a diagnostic, obviously, to some sort of degree, and mom or dad was diagnosed with Huntington's disease, right? So some of these patients actually know that. They know that that's a disease that they're kind of waiting, and they feel like a little bit like a ticking time bomb. Because there's really nothing that you can do about it. Because it's super deadly, that you really lose a whole lot of what made you you. There's a great deal of anxiety that I'm sure you guys can imagine that would go into that. So that's one of the really terrible ones, to be perfectly honest. There's also a lot of regulation when it comes to Huntington's testing as well. There are clinics specifically, aimed at looking at like a psych evaluation before they give this information, because there are some people that say this is a death sentence and they might commit suicide based on this information, right? So that's important, right? Do no harm. Like that's a huge part of medical, right? You don't want to do any harm to anybody, really. But with that whole point, sorry, we went on a little bit of a tangent there, but does everyone understand autosomal dominant inheritance? Okay. I'll go on tangents, people, so keep me on track, right? Okay. So, I talked about autosomal dominant inheritance, I talked about autosomal recessive inheritance, but I didn't really talk about what my piece of the puzzle is when it comes to what a genetic counselor does with any of that information, right? So, what I think is important for you guys to understand is what my role is. And my role really depends on specialty. So, as a genetic counselor, there are a lot of different roles and hats that we can really wear. And it's not like any other medical profession where where you can have a lot of different specialties. So what I'm not even listing on here is there are cardiac genetic counselors. There are ophthalmology genetic counselors. There are psych genetic counselors, right? So it's not unlike any other, medical profession where there are different subsets of it. But I'll talk to you about some common ones, okay? So I worked in preconception genetics. That was my recent job, and that's really where I worked in predominantly. So first, I think what's important to start with is what is infertility. So basically, if you're working in preconception genetics, you are working with individuals that are either not getting pregnant, which is infertility, and they don't know why. There are some that say, we've had a ton of miscarriages and we don't really know what the cause is. Could you help us there? There are some that say, hey, we actually know that one of the children, or like one of the pregnancies that we had was affected with a specific condition. We want to prevent this in the future. We had a child that was affected with the disease, and we want to know, what are chances of having another child affected with those sort of diseases. So that's what preconception encompasses. Any questions about that so far? No? Okay. So what is infertility? Infertility is regular, unprotected sex for at least 1 year without conceiving. And if the woman's over 35, then that means trying 6 months after not conceiving. Is it?
No.
No. Okay. Good. That'd be my answer too. I get this question a lot. That would be something that, some of my patients have already been vetted with because their doctors already told them that's not the case. But what are the infertility causes? We know that there's some male factor infertility, female factor infertility, that's about 30% each. We know that it can be combined, about 10%. 25% is unexplained. It's a huge research opportunity right there. For unexplained infertility, that is something that I can tell you that labs that I've already worked with are working really hard to develop a test. They're really working very hard to figure out, okay, what are the causes of infertility? What are some of our suspicions? Let's do a whole lot of research on people that are having some of our testing and that are partnered with that sort of study. And let's try to identify and look and see what are the causes or what are the potential causes, and maybe we can look at it a little bit further and figure it out from there. And then about 5% is always other, as far as I'm concerned. That's with everything. Any questions about
With psychological perhaps?
understand?
Would you say some of that could be psychological?
Perhaps, right? I'll give you an anecdotal story. There are some parts that literally have said they've had to sit down and have a conversation with their doctor about how to have sex. That's like a legit conversation that sometimes has had to happen. Some people have no idea which hole it goes in. That's a real question. That's a real thing that's happening. So, and they get, how they get past all the way to the infertility doctor that's talking to them about it, that's a whole other side story. But yeah, that's really happened. But you said psychological, right? So, I don't know. I think that perhaps, but that wouldn't necessarily be my suspicion. Any other questions? Okay. So, what causes infertility? First of all, are the eggs there, right? There's two things that you need for a pregnancy, egg and sperm, right? So, if there aren't eggs there, there aren't sperm there, for example, like low sperm count. We talked about cystic fibrosis, for example. For men that are affected with cystic fibrosis, for example, they're missing what's called the vas deferens. Fancy term for saying, hey, those are the ducts that get sperm out. So if they're missing, are you able to have children? Right? Yeah, so are you able to have children naturally, I should say?
No.
No. You can have children though. We can get those out. That's definitely part of fertility as well. So that's also part of is the equipment present, right? Like fallopian tubes, are they blocked? So has anyone heard of endometriosis before? Right, I'm seeing some nodding heads. Endometriosis can sometimes, it's like this proliferation that can essentially block the fallopian tubes. So if they are blocking the fallopian tubes, they can cause a lot of pain, first and foremost. That's why a lot of women know about it. But beyond that, if something's blocking it, are the eggs able to get down from the fallopian tubes? Right? So that's an issue. Now, there are plenty of women with endometriosis that are able to have children, for the record, right? And just because something's blocking it doesn't mean it's blocking it totally, right? So that's also something to kind of keep in mind. What's your question?
Does an egg ever block the fallopian tube? Like, can an egg be too big for it?
So, not necessarily, but there are things called ectopic pregnancies where it gets stuck in the fallopian tubes, right? So, and an ectopic pregnancy is when the egg stays there, right? And the sperm meets it in the middle, right there, right? And that's what an ectopic pregnancy essentially is. That's a pregnancy that's an egg that's been fertilized inside the fallopian tubes. That can cause a huge issue, as I'm sure you guys can imagine, right?
Would they have to, like, remove it, or can they?
Pretty early on. Yeah, they would have to remove it.
Like, would that terminate the pregnancy, or could they remove it?
It
to
would.
the uterus?
It would. Any other questions? No? All right. So how do you treat infertility? So there's a lot of different ways that you can treat infertility, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm a master of fertility. But the two things that I focus on as a genetic counselor are these two: in vitro fertilization and pre-implantation genetic diagnosis. These are usually like Clomid, gonadotropins, those are hormones, the hormone therapy that's given. Intrauterine insemination is implanting the sperm, while someone's on medical table. So that's that. I'm going to focus on in vitro fertilization now. So this is essentially where the egg is aspirated, right? Then we have that on a petri dish essentially. We're putting sperm inside there and we're kind of developing eggs from there. Once those, I shouldn't say, we're not developing eggs, we're developing zygotes essentially. But anyway, from there it's incubated, okay? And then it's transferred, the embryo is transferred to the uterus, right around here, okay? So why do I care about that? Why would a genetic counselor be part of that? Because of PGD. So, like I mentioned to you guys before, there are some that know that they carry a specific mutation, right? Cystic fibrosis. Let's just use that as an example. And their partner is also a carrier for cystic fibrosis. And they have a conversation to the tune of, we don't want to have a child that we know we're bringing into this world that's affected with this condition. Can you help us there? And the answer is, first we got to find your mutations. So we need to know what mutations that mom has, dad has. And then when we're doing this whole development of in vitro, it's more than one embryo that we're developing here. So what pre-implantation genetic diagnosis does is, hey, we're going to take a cell. We're going to take a cell from the developing embryo, and we're going to test it. We're going to look to see, are both mutations that parents carry in that specific cell. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking to see and only implant embryos that are not affected with the condition. We don't rule out carriers because we know carriers don't have the condition, right? It's really, we're concerned about those that are specifically affected with that condition. Go ahead.
So you take the fertilized egg, remove cell from it. Are you able to diagnose with one cell, or do you need to then culture that cell?
So, again, I'm not a super scientist when it comes to this, but it's about 1 or 2 cells.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're able to develop it from there.
And then if that's a healthy egg, that gets put back for...
So if no mutations are identified for the thing that we're specifically looking for, right? Because when you do that test, you're not testing everything. You're testing that specific thing that you're looking for. So it's quite possible that when you implant that in, that there could be another issue that you're just not aware of, right, when you implant it in. But for what we're specifically looking for, the chance is very low. The other part of that, which I'll talk about a little bit later, it looks like, in my presentation, is there are things that you want to corroborate your story, right? You said, we implanted something, but nothing is 100% in science, right? There's always gray area. So when someone does PGD, the recommendation is for them to follow up once they're, have achieved their pregnancy with a CBS or an amniocentesis procedure. I'll go into what those are, but just think about them as diagnostic tests during pregnancy that are looking to confirm what we, aim to do, essentially. Go ahead.
Is there like a risk for the embryo doing this test to it? 'Cause
So is there a risk for the embryo? That's a good question. I would say that, again, that gets a little bit more technical than what I can kind of bring to the table here, but think about it like this. We're all made of cells. Take one cell, it's really actually no big deal in the very beginning. Typically, that's my understanding for sure. Any other questions? No? Okay. Oh. So I talked about carrier screening before, right? And that was actually the company that I was working for. The company that I was working for was called Markese, and they do about a little over 300 conditions that they test couples for. They're testing women for more. Women are tested for more because there are these things called, which I'm not going over, but I'll go over very briefly, which are X-linked conditions. X-linked conditions are passed down through females. So relevant for mom, not so much for dad. But when they're tested for these conditions, a lot of these individuals are, trying to achieve a pregnancy. So with that in mind, they want to achieve a healthy pregnancy. With this in mind, they're being tested for over 300 conditions, and they're really looking to see, hey, are we matching up for both? Because these are those autosomal recessive conditions that I mentioned to you before. Not testing for those autosomal dominant conditions, because why? What would that mean?
Was autosomal dominant, there would be, there's no chance of, what I mean to say is, it was recessive and only one partner had it and the other one didn't, child has a better chance of not receiving that trait. Whereas if it's just the dominant, they're going to get it either way.
So, if it's dominant, there's a 50% chance that they would get it, right? And if it was recessive and both parents carried it, that's when there's a 25% chance, right? But for someone, if we're testing for a dominant condition, is it screening or is it diagnostic? Right. So that's something to keep in mind. A lot of questions that I got often when I was working that job was, did you test for cancer? Did we test for cancer? No. Right? Cancers, by and large, are dominant conditions. Those are conditions that, if they're identified, they're not just a carrier, they're affected with the condition. Go ahead.
Would this go along with women that are having children past 35 and they test and see if their pregnancy is going to be at risk?
That's a good question. I got that a lot, right? So what you're asking is a little bit more complicated. You're asking about an actual pregnancy, right? So carrier screening can be done when you're pregnant, but it's not part of that. So a lot of questions that I got also was, did this test for Down syndrome? No, right? We're not testing the pregnancy, we're testing mom or dad. And if mom or dad had Down syndrome, we would know, right? Now, that being said, there's always nuances with everything, and there's always a chance that they could be carried for what's called a Robertsonian translocation. But 95% of cases of Down syndrome are happening by chance, and it's not something that's inherited by the parent. Go ahead.
what's the difference between diagnostic and screening?
That's a good question. I'm actually going to go over that. We'll talk about it. Any other questions?
I have a friend, her mom and dad both are muted and deaf, but
Okay.
their whole brother and sister, they are not. How come?
It's a good question. So, first and foremost is what caused that, right? It's important to understand what caused it in order to discern, why or not someone has it, right? So, without knowing the cause, I couldn't answer your question, quite frankly. I couldn't tell you. But there are about 50% of cases of hearing loss, for example, are genetic. They're inherited. Could that mean that they have an inherited mutation? Yeah, but it sounds like there's more than just that going on,
Because
right?
if dad was deaf and mute, he married to the same woman with the same qualities.
Mhm.
So their kid's supposed to be one of them, or maybe.
Not necessarily, right?
Yeah.
Right?
But they're
Because
all right.
it depends what caused it. That's why it's so important to understand what caused it to kind of decide how that would happen. right? Let's just say you both have brown eyes, right? Is your child definitely gonna have brown eyes?